Hello, my name is Ben Cowell and I'm Director General of Historic Houses here in the UK. And it's my great pleasure to be talking to you at your mid-term conference today. I've called my talk Country House Survival because, of course, this year, 2020, has been all about survival of one sort or another. It's been about human survival in the face of this dreadful disease. But it's also been about economic survival for any business dependent on the footfall of paying customers. And country houses are very much part of the tourism and hospitality sectors that have been in the eye of the storm of the economic consequences of this pandemic and the lockdown that followed on from it. I also like this title because it sounds a bit like a television game show. You can almost imagine one called Country House Survival. It reminds me a little bit of a game show here in the UK, which I know is in other European countries too, called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. For those who don't know the format, it involves a group of celebrities who are sent off to some exotic location to live together in a camp and to be subject to various grisly ordeals of one sort or another, often involving insects or disgusting food. Now, the news from the UK is that a new series of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is about to appear on our screens. But the contestants have not been allowed to go to Australia, which they normally would. So instead, they've found a new home, which is here, a country house in North Wales called Gurkha Castle. Gurkha Castle, in fact, although it looks like a medieval castle, is a 19th century construction. It's barely 200 years old, this particular castle. It's a fabrication, a fiction. It built on the remains of a medieval house that was originally there. It is entirely a Gothic fantasy of the early decades of the 19th century. And this will be the venue for this year's series of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Now, I wanted to talk about Gurkha Castle because in some ways it is emblematic of the story of the country house as it unfolded during the 20th and into the early 21st centuries. This is a castle, after all, that was requisitioned during the Second World War. It became home to Jewish refugees in those war years. After the war, it became a tourist destination. Hundreds of thousands of visitors flocked here every year to enjoy the castle, to witness the medieval reenactments that were put on display here, the jousting and the tournaments that happened here in this fake medieval castle setting. But sadly for the castle, it closed its doors in 1987. It had ceased to be a sustainable tourist proposition. For many years, it lay empty and falling down. There was talk of it becoming a private house and then a hotel, but eventually the castle got in such a bad state the government stepped in and has now rescued it by enabling a preservation trust to be set up and to purchase the castle. And we can only hope that the generosity of Ant and Dec, the presenters of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, will enable the castle itself to get itself out of the difficult economic situation in which it found itself. But generally speaking, this has been a year to forget. It's been a disastrous set of circumstances for anybody. And it's been particularly disastrous, I know, for lots and lots of country houses, all over Europe as well as in the United Kingdom. I should say that Historic Houses, the organisation I represent, itself represents 1,500 member properties stretched across the nations of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And many of these places would normally be open to the public. 320 of our houses are open for free to our members of the organisation. But of course, none of them have been able to open their doors since the middle of March, when the UK went into its own economic lockdown. Normally, they would be welcoming 27 million visits every year, which is a significant number and underlines just how important these places are to the tourism economy in the UK. And early on, we surveyed our members and realised that the economic consequences of the lockdown were very serious indeed. Many of them told us they only had reserves that might last only a few months. 3/4 told us they only had 6 months worth of reserves, for example. We estimate that something in the region of £267 million has been lost through revenue foregone because doors haven't been opened to tourist visitors. And the consequence is that thousands of jobs either have been lost already or are now at risk. The government job protection scheme in the United Kingdom comes to an end at the end of next month. And so I'm afraid the situation is not looking good for many people in the heritage sector at the moment. And many of our properties, 500 in fact, are involved as wedding venues. Weddings are the main source of income for them. And any wedding business has borne the brunt of this lockdown. Weddings continue to be a very difficult area. You can only have a wedding for up to 30 people in England at the moment. And so a property that depended on weddings has had a particularly difficult year this year. And the consequence is also going to be felt in the fabric of the properties in themselves. We already knew there was a £1.4 billion repair backlog in our member properties, and that will only have increased because this year so many repairs and maintenance works have been postponed or cancelled altogether as a consequence of the lack of income. All of these circumstances are very difficult indeed, and I think you have to look back almost 70 years to a comparable situation. I'm talking about the years just after the Second World War, when so many country houses faced demolition as a consequence of the drying up of income streams and the difficulty families had of keeping these places going. Back then, of course, there wasn't listing in the way we understand it now, and families did have the option to pull down their houses, which they don't have today. We're thankful for that. But there was a problem, and the problem was that so many country houses were disappearing in front of people's eyes that the government felt it had to do something to address the problem. It set up a committee chaired by this gentleman, Sir Ernest Gowers, to investigate the situation facing country houses and to recommend how they can best be looked after into the future. And Gowers and his committee published their report 70 years ago this year in June 1950. And they began the report by saying, in no uncertain terms, that these places were indeed of the highest importance. No feature of our country contributes more to its beauty and character than the historic houses of which it has such a profusion. And Gowers goes on to talk about these places as a national asset whose loss would be irreplaceable. So having established that these are important places, what then did Gowers recommend for their ongoing survival? Well, this report was commissioned by a Labour government, a socialist government. And I think the government would have been quite surprised by Ernest Gowers' conclusion, which was effectively that houses should remain as private residences as far as possible. By far the best and most sustainable solution for these houses was for them to continue as lived-in family homes, preferably occupied by the families that were connected with those properties. In extreme circumstances, he said the government could step in or the National Trust could take over, but it was by far the best route for these houses to be looked after by private owners. Now, it won't surprise you to hear that we at Historic Houses, whose job is to represent the interests of privately owned houses, have spent our summer months busy lobbying government ministers in the interest of the long-term protection of country house properties. Here are some pictures of government ministers visiting two of our member houses, Nebworth House and Tissington in Derbyshire. And we've been saying to government that really they should be looking out for the fact that so many properties are still in private ownership, but need the conditions in which they can survive. They need particular tax arrangements, ideally from time to time emergency grants for their well-being, but also they need to be able to open their doors once again to paying visitors. So we early on were arguing with the government about COVID secure means of reopening places, getting houses out of the lockdown and back once again, welcoming visitors. We worked with the tourist authorities to develop a kite mark called We're Good to Go. This was a means by which premises could demonstrate that undertaken the risk assessments and the sanitary steps that are needed to ensure that visitors feel safe and secure on a visit. And we spent our summer running training webinars for houses to show them how they can reopen their cafes, their gardens, the houses themselves in safe and secure ways. Here's the catering arrangement at Burton Agnes, outdoor catering in tents. It's a bit rough and ready, but it's all showing the ways, the steps they've taken to ensure their offer is as COVID secure as it can be. We had lots and lots of discussions, again, about the important subjects of public conveniences, of the toilets, making sure that visitors to these places had loos they could use on their visit. And we were encouraging houses to undertake these COVID secure steps and then to reopen. And I'm pleased to say that over 100 gardens and nearly 40 houses were indeed able to open over the summer months. We kept our website updated and encouraged lots of people to go out and visit them once they were indeed open again. Private houses in some ways were able to respond more quickly and more swiftly because they are used to adapting to circumstances and ensuring that all the provision was there for visitors to be able to enjoy a day out in COVID secure ways. Often people were on time ticket entry. That was the key to getting places open. But there were plenty of other ways in which houses were able to open up this summer. And they've been experimenting with new ways of developing their business. This is a screenshot of the virtual tours being offered by Blenheim Palace this summer. This was a tour you could pay to go on from the comfort of your own home, taken by the curator around Blenheim through this amazing 3D imagery, computerized versions of the interior, the important interiors at Blenheim. And plenty of houses were uploading videos and other forms of social media to encourage engagement with the house. This is another picture from Nebworth of another example of innovation. It's not a particularly good picture, but this shows the drive-in cinema that Nebworth House instigated. They ran a series of drive-in cinema performances all through the summer. They were sold out. You can see on the left, Nebworth itself lit up red in solidarity for culture and the arts, and all of the cars there enjoying the films with the sound relayed through the car speaker system. And this was repeated at other places too. This is Longleat's Night Glow exhibition, where people could visit, but in the comfort of their own cars, observe, I think, over 30 hot air balloons that were specially arranged for the occasion. Those houses that are involved in food, manufacture or retail have been able to continue as normal, of course, and places have made a virtue of this. Burley ran a very successful summer fine food market with stalls arranged in socially distant ways, one-way systems for the visitors to be able to enjoy the different foodstuffs on offer, whether it's organic cider or even goat's milk ice cream. All of these things were there at Burley, and it was a great day out for everyone. And those houses that are involved in accommodation have had a reasonably good year. The staycation, after all, has been a thing of the moment. Lots of wedding venues have turned their accommodation into short-term holiday lets. And not just houses, but also glamping opportunities. This is the glamping hut at Knepp in Sussex. And even this one in Northern Ireland. This is a former Swiss Army truck converted into a glamping pod, which comes with its own sauna at the very back as well. So lots of imaginative and innovative ways of doing business these days. This is a picture from Powderham in Devon, which very much has become a house all about health and well-being. I'm afraid this isn't quite the socially distanced yoga that you would now see, but yoga can now recommence, provided all the mats are 2 meters apart. And Powderham, like so many places, is rethinking its purpose and has decided that its purpose is to be all about health and well-being and working with the local community. So my talk was about survival, but we of course need to think about moving from survival to sustainability. And it's great to see a project like this in the UK get up and running last week, helping heritage organisations to think through what it takes, not just to survive this awful year, but also to think about the sustainable ways in which they can keep income flowing in order to protect the heritage at the core of the operation. So I'm thanking you again for inviting me to talk to you today. I very much look forward to hearing from you about the different experiences across Europe and the different ways other houses have found to find sustainable routes into the future out of this desperate year in 2020. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to look forward greatly to the conversation.